mode.
Good morning. My name is Bill Baker. I'm with Firestorm and located here in beautiful Roswell, Georgia, that is, and we're pleased to have you with us. I'd like to welcome you, and this is the Crisis Coach webinar series that is presented in conjunction with our support from the the Georgia Independent School Association. Georgia Independent School Association has been our sponsor on these webinars for 3 or 4 years now, and we're pleased to have their backing. We also like to have you become our friend. Firestorm Solutions on Facebook, Firestorm Soul on Twitter. There's a hashtag. The hashtag's Crisis Coach. Firestorm transforms crisis into value and empowers you to manage risk and crises. Firestorm expertise is crisis management, critical decision support, crisis communications, crisis public relations, and consequence management. Our attorneys ask us to remind you that the presentation is not complete without the accompanying oral comments and discussion. This information should be read in conjunction with the advice from your organization's personal counsel. Do not interpret this information as legal advice or legal opinion. Dr. Jackson is out assisting people today, so he's not on the webinar with us today, but we do appreciate his support and sponsorship in this series of webinars. As I mentioned, the webinar series is underwritten by the Georgia Independent School Association. We have done considerable work within the organization with the various planning and instructional webinars that we've held at conventions. You can go to firestorm.com. You can watch past webinars in this series, and you can register for future webinars. Our presenter today is our very own Karen Masullo. Karen is the Chief Intelligence Officer of Firestorm and Executive Vice President. She has extensive experience in corporate training and in social media monitoring and following all of the various tools in order to assist you to be able to stay up to date on social media. Karen, over to you, please.
Thanks, Bill. I appreciate it. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today, and I would just like to say again thank you to the Georgia Independent Schools Association. As a member of the Georgia Independent Schools Association or any school association that might be joining us today, please understand that you have some benefits that are value adds that your association wants to make sure you're aware of. If you would like to do a high-level assessment, a co-facilitated assessment of your program, your security, and your organization, a few different measurement points, we're happy to conduct that assessment for you at no fee. So you can reach out to us at webinars@firestorm.com, and we'll make sure to get you scheduled with one of our principals to make sure that that happens. And also, you are able to implement our Bertha license at no fee for the first year. That's a $7,500 license, and it includes some fabulous tools and training around our behavioral risk threat assessment program. Likewise, please just reach out to us at webinars@firestorm.com. Go to our website, fill out a contact form, give us a call. We'll be happy to make sure that you are able to implement that in your organization and schedule a time to assure you get the support that you need. So again, thank you to your school association, to the Georgia Independent School Association, and the wonderful folks we've worked with there for more than 5 years. That's me. You don't need to see me again. So when I was putting this webinar together, I was thinking about a couple of things. And mainly I was thinking about, we always talk about what keeps you up at night. For your particular school, what do you think about? Do you think about, what happens if we have a tornado? What happens if there's a hurricane on the coast or the Gulf and it comes up and floods into Georgia? If we have a rain system or a storm system sit on top of us for days and days and our roads wash out. And of course, we're always concerned about violence. Oh, by the way, if you have a question during the session, you can use the GoToWebinar dashboard on the right-hand side of your screen. and pop your question in there. And if I don't get to it today, because I have quite a bit of material to cover, I will respond to you in an email. So I did want to mention that. So back to what keeps you up at night. You know, we think about the primary things that could occur on our facility, and we think certainly loss of life. What if we had a lightning strike on our football field, God forbid? What if there was some type of natural disaster, some injury on property? What if we had a major supplier interruption to our facilities or our building? What if you're working on a major library expansion and suddenly your contractor leaves in the middle of the project and you're left without a project to complete? What if there's an epidemic or a pandemic and 70% of your student body and your teachers aren't available for class? Do you have an alternate means of either instructing your students or accommodating learning in your organization? What if there's what if your income is based on alumni or grants or other subsidies or monies? What if you lose that major income source? What happens? And what happens if there's a public brand damage event, situation with one of your sports teams? Maybe there's a hazing incident. Maybe something happens on your grounds that has nothing to do with you but damages your brand. Sadly, we see all too often after the fact, you may read in the paper that someone has been arrested for inappropriate behavior with a minor, and you realize 3 or 4 years ago that person might have been somehow associated with your organization. So there's some movement that needs to be taken there. There are 2 types of organizations, those that have been hacked and those that don't know they've been hacked. Which one are you? You may have a failure of senior leadership, and that can take many, many forms, and again affects your brand, but also affects the morale of those teachers and other staff members in your organization when that senior leadership, the folks at the top, violate trust. And then certainly, especially if you're in an independent school that is of a secular nature, you may be a target for terrorism today, and we understand that, and we want to help keep you safe. So today, when I was thinking about what is predictive intelligence and what are intelligence networks, predictive intelligence is a term of art that's used by marketers. Marketers always use these sorts of things first, and then we look at them and we say, okay, how can we adapt these tools to also fit the purpose of keeping people and property safe? And marketers look at predictive intelligence so they can say, okay, you know, you like Led Zeppelin, and because you're of a certain age that listen to Led Zeppelin, you probably read these books, you probably watch these television shows, you probably like this food and use this deodorant. And it almost causes an isolation of a tribe of people that may or may not be appropriate or accurate. So you're only seeing information or seeing news that people feel needs to be fed to you, right? You've got to really make an effort to reach outside of what's being pushed toward you. Well, that's what we want you to do. We want you to create a predictive intelligence network that isn't what you're being fed, but what you're feeding. We want you to populate that predictive intelligence and that intelligence network with real people, real places, and then use social or technology or digital communications to connect those parts and pieces so that in times of crisis, you have the ability to not only message out, but to become aware of more quickly a crisis or a problem. So we're going to look at some examples of that and how it might fit with your organization. But right now, if you're sitting in your conference room or at the office and you've got some teachers or other folks in your school with you, I want you all to take a moment and think about what is the worst thing that could happen in your school today, right now, and then ask the more important question: could you handle it? What would happen right now? It's a difficult thing to put yourself in that situation. It's uncomfortable. We know that, but it needs to be done. Things like drills and lockdowns and lockouts, they start to become almost routine. We start to be we're kind of immune to it, and that's a good thing. We want to be able to have that muscle memory that allows us to act very quickly in terms of a major crisis. So we've done a lot with school shootings. We've come a long way with violence on our campuses, but there are other significant events that could happen that we're really not prepared for because we haven't thought about them. So I want you to think these things through. We did a survey of both businesses and school organizations and school from every level, and we said, what crisis event would be the #1 concern for your organization? And overwhelmingly this year, people have said it's cyber, it's a hack of some type. It's a leak, it's somebody hacking into our systems, it's someone doing something that involves a hack in technology. That is the #1 thing. And while that is something that we should be concerned about, I don't want us to only be focused on the cyber because it's in our faces and in the news. Natural disaster devastation, some type of a natural disaster event is #2. And I think that's an appropriate place for it. We really need to be balancing that because nobody messes with Mother Nature, right? We don't know when something is going to happen that can affect our schools and our students, everything from an ice storm to a flood. We must have contingency plans. We must understand how to keep our students, our parents, and our community safe in that event. People look to us for leadership in that regard. And then workplace and school violence, certainly violence visiting our organizations. So look through all of these, and then what I want you to do is think about the nuance within those sort of chunks of events that could happen. What could we look at that might be that outlier event that we just hadn't expected? And let's talk that through, because it is those unexpected outlier sorts of events that allow us to see the gaps in our programs and in our intelligence network. Oh, we're not connected with such and such an organization. We're not connected with these people, face-to-face or technologically, and we need to be. So once you think about that worst crisis, the worst thing that could happen to you, I want you to think about the outlier event that goes along with it, and then who do you need to contact? Who needs to know about this event? And who is affected? Now, last month we talked about message maps and how you communicate and how you anticipate these things and write them out. We're not going to talk about that today. Today we're going to talk about how we see the event occurring possibly before it does, and how we learn of an event when it has occurred if we are learning about it via maybe a social media or digital manner. So I don't know if many of you are familiar with this event, but last weekend in the city of Dallas, someone hacked into the siren system. Someone hacked every tornado siren in Dallas, all 156 of them. And for 2 hours, these sirens went off. Well, that's a concern, right? If they can be hacked to go on, they can be hacked to go off. And of course, people joked about it. I mean, you're going to, in a situation like that, we turn to humor in the most frightening of times. And people were frightened. So we were joking, people were joking on the web, the zombie apocalypse won out on this one. I don't know that zombies know how to use sirens or hack into them, but certainly that could be a concern. But on a more serious note, people panicked. People working in high-rise buildings, people on public transportation, people all over the city suddenly heard these sirens going off. And given the state of the world, we're at any given time, but they were concerned. There was some fright here. So how do you get the message out quickly, and then how do you resolve an issue of those outlier things you didn't expect. How about the crane collapse last year on the Tappan Zee Bridge? What do we need to think about when something like this happens? If it happened in your area, would people be able to get to the location they needed to get to? So can your students get to school? Can your teachers get to school? If you have trips planned outside of school, can you get to those places? What are your alternate methods of communicating what's going on to your constituency? And you all know in your own backyard, we had a significant incident on I-85. I don't know when the last time you recall a section of a major highway being destroyed by fire, but I don't recall it. I remember in the earthquake back in the day in California, we lost some major arteries. But this is a pretty significant event, and y'all know this. Those of you who live in Atlanta, our CEO is in Roswell. He was on his way to Alabama, I think. I can't remember, but he was going somewhere. And we talked on the phone very early, about 6 o'clock in the morning, and I asked him how long he'd been on the road, and he said, I had to leave at 3:30 because that section of the highway is out, and if I waited any longer, everyone is taking an alternate route, and that alternate route is starting to back up at about 5 o'clock in the morning. So it just sounds like a nightmare to me. So how do you plan for something like this? There's a rail system right behind there. What if that fire had spread to that? What if suddenly the entire transportation infrastructure somehow became affected? In Lynchburg, Virginia, a couple of years ago, there was a major fire and explosion after a train carrying crude oil derailed. They evacuated cities, and not cities, but towns. Well, if that's your school, not only if you're evacuated during the school day, what do you do the next day? What if you're going to be closed down for 3 or 4 days because there is a problem with the air quality or some other situation? We had a situation in West Virginia a couple of years ago where water was chemically poisoned. Well, you can't conduct school if you don't have water in your facility. You can't have children in a facility with no water. What did they do? What were the alternate plans? And if you don't know, it's a really interesting study. It's a great case study. As a matter of fact, that might be something good to do for another school webinar. We want you to think about these types of instances, and the way you do that is to look around. That's number one. So today, look out your window at your school. I think of those of you who were on last month's webinar, I gave an example of something I'll give again today. We have a school that we work with in Paraguay, and we were doing a security assessment for them of their building and grounds. And our CEO said, what are you going to do about that apartment building balcony risk over your roof? And they said, what? And he said that, the apartment building that's right next to you guys, one of those balconies is just about 5 feet above your roof. It's really just a little jump. There's hardly any space between the building and your building and theirs. And even though you've got a fence down at the bottom, anybody could jump from that balcony to your roof. And they had to go outside and look, because even though they see it every day, they'd never noticed it. And they'd never noticed what a risk that it could be, that someone could come up through that building, across and to their roof. They take over their school. And this is a private school in an area that is very prone to kidnapping of its high-profile students with high-profile parents. So it is a real security problem, and fortunately we were able to identify that for them. So these types of risks and awareness are very specific to your physical location, your organization, your culture, your teachings, your philosophy, your mission, and your students and parents. So look at what is the closest building to you and what does it house? Do you have a chemical manufacturing plant in your backyard that you don't know about? It doesn't have to be in your backyard. Is it 2 miles or 3 miles away? Are you in a multiple tenant property for some reason? You know, we have many organizations that join us that might be child care or day camp situations that in urban areas are actually housed in multi-tenant buildings. Do you know who's in that building with you? How close are fire officials, police, other first responder officials? Now, we are really good as schools in making sure we've made those connections. We have our firefighters visit our properties and show our kids how things work. We have police officers work with us to avoid risks and threats and drug risks and drunk driving and other instances. We need to do that same kind of external outreach activity to businesses and our community at large around us. We had one school that we worked with where we were talking about evacuation points, and they said it's no problem, we just evacuate to the mall behind us, which they had been doing for years and years and years. So everybody knew that if they wanted to make a secondary target location, they were going to target that mall, because that's where the 1,200 kids from this specific school were going to be evacuating to. That's not an optimum solution, right? So you need to understand what's behind you, what's in front of you. Make sure you're connected via your social accounts. If you don't have a social account, you should at least own your name on your social account. So if there's a crisis or a situation, so if parents can't get through when a situation has happened at your school, maybe they can go to a social account and get a piece of correct information instead of getting falsehoods and rumors via someone else's account. Because these connections can help you message in a crisis. That's the point. And the messaging helps keep people safer. So the messaging that goes out can correct incorrect information. It helps to keep parents, et cetera, safe, right? If you know right now, those of you with children, if something happened at your children's school, you'd be in the car on your way to the school right now. Maybe that's not the best thing. Maybe there's a threat that could actually harm you on your way there. What you need to know is where is the event? Where is the collection point? Where do I need to go for information? And so you've got to have good social networks created so that you can communicate that information both face-to-face, on the telephone, and of course digitally through your social accounts. Next, we really, once we've looked around us, we need to understand, is our neighbor's location a risk? It may have nothing to do with us, but if they're being targeted, can we be a secondary target? Are there transportation risks associated with the location? And how do your students get to where they're going? So is the transportation risk because of a flood that has washed out roads? I live in South Carolina, and we had a 1,000-year flood event that washed out. We had a rain event, a flood event, and then as the water started to drain, our river banks overflowed because the water was trying to rush back out to the ocean, and it was a terrible event. And as a result of that, we had so many roads wash out, and there were some schools that had not returned to operation. Kids couldn't get to schools. It's been a challenging situation. And you read about the initial situation, you read about the flood, but then it passes out of our minds, doesn't it? While the people who are involved certainly are still rebuilding, still trying to figure out how to continue on with their mission. We want you to be prepared for that. And again, we've talked about evacuation points, and we've talked about changing those up to make sure you've protected people and property. If somebody knows your cycle of evacuation points, they can become secondary targets. Because we know every crisis is a human crisis. If you create a robust network of people, physical people, in combination with monitoring, through technology. When we say monitoring through technology, we're not talking about anything covert. What we're talking about is aggregating publicly posted social comments, blog contributions, discussion board comments, publicly posted things. We aggregate them so that they're easier to review. And then we filter out the noise so that we can focus in on your geography, your issues, your syntax, your context, so that while we could not possibly look at 100% of conversations going on that might have something to do with you or your organization, we can pick up more than you're seeing today. And if you could, wouldn't you? If you could save or help one person in your organization, one student, one parent, wouldn't you do that? Of course you would. Recently, we had a tragic situation in Florida where an employee who had been terminated came back and murdered 2 people. We've seen that happen in school organizations, business organizations. School is a workplace. And this person had a Facebook account. This person also had a Twitter account. And they also had another Facebook account, which you can find if you look at the Twitter account. It doesn't point to the same Facebook account that you're looking at. There's an alternative one, and it's public. Now, there may be private messages within these accounts that we can't see, but we can look at the public messages. And if we know there's a threat, if we are starting to identify behaviors of concern, and we can save someone from having to go through something like this, the loss of life, seeing that happen, a family being affected, and we're able to step in and help that person, that's what we need to be doing. After an event, we also need to know, can we go back and analyze and find sources of information? We use a couple of tools in order to monitor and develop a profile of risk for our clients. And one of them allows us to just drop a pin and draw a geo fence around a specific organization or an area and sort of get a feel for what's going on in the community there. And this tool is represented on the right-hand side. And we actually, we were credited by a couple of our clients in Boston with letting them know that there was a situation at the Boston Marathon before officials let them know. We had contacted our clients to let them know there was a significant event and they needed to either send their employees home, figure out alternative routes to get their employees home, let their employees know to expect significant delays. We told them it may be impossible for them to get back into the city the next day because it was a pretty significant event that had occurred, even though we didn't have all the details. And we did that through a tool, and this tool was used by the Boston police to actually go back in time to the day it happened and look at who had shared video or images so they could reach out to those people. If you recall, there was a great deal of outreach going on for people to submit their videos and images to help with the investigation. So, I mean, it can be very powerful when you have the ability to narrow in on something, and it's all public. Again, we're not looking at anything private, because initial threats or risk behaviors are frequently shared or observed on social media. And most of these posts provide a lot of information. It might not be in the exact post that we see, but that's why Firestorm has analysts sitting in chairs, because our analysts are trained to then put the data in context. We look a little bit more deeply to understand who are this person's social connections. What is their social graph? Can someone help us help this person? We found a threat at a school in Canada last year, And it took a little while to figure out what was going on, because it turned out the person had 7 different accounts that she was using as different individuals to share these messages. And she was on her way from her home to the school with a weapon. We were actually able to see her walking as she was tweeting, and the tweet showed a path, just like you see in this image, although that's not the image of it. But we could see the threat evolve, and we're able to let that school know. So there's a lot of power in what we're doing, and I can tell you, for those of you who are clients of ours now and we're doing this for, you and we all know that the best thing that happens every day is when we tell you there's no information, that there's no threat out there today. We can monitor your football team and talk about the games that are won, but you've got people to do that, or you can do that on your own. But when it comes to, we think someone's coming near your school right now with a weapon, we don't want to have to deliver that news. We're able to, but the best news is no news in this situation. You know, we've all seen this situation, and I apologize for the graphic nature of these images. We saw this incident this week, and I use this because it's an important reminder that this is one of those outlier events. I don't think any of us expected that United Airlines or the Chicago Aviation Authority Police, I'm not quite sure what group they're with, would enter a plane and forcibly drag someone off so that other crew could deadhead on the flight. And we know, what we do know today is that every one of your schools has activity going on that's being filmed every day that you are not aware of. Now, hopefully it's great activity. It's of your dance team winning something. It's of the football team during practice. What we don't want to see is 2 kids bullying each other on Tumblr that suddenly meet on your property or outside your school property and film a vicious fight. We see that all of the time. If you just Google, or not Google, go to YouTube and just look up school fights, sadly, and they're not limited to any type of school or any geographic area. They happen all over. And every time we think we're safe or immune from it, we're not. And this is what happens. The viral nature of this is shocking because it happened so fast. And what happened was the CEO of United Airlines, who, by the way, just won an award as Communicator of the Year, communicated in a way that was irresponsible. He didn't know all the facts of the case. And when he apologized for having to, and put this in quotes, reaccommodate customers. If the way United Airlines is reaccommodating people today is by dragging them off a plane, then I think we need to redefine the word reaccommodate. But we know this happens. We have a significant situation that happens in one of our schools. We have a bunch of people in the background saying, we've got to get in front of this, we've got to get in front of this. Folks, once the horse is out of the barn, you can't get in front of it. You can catch up to it. You can try to get it into control. But unless you've got a helicopter, which is going to scare the horse, I don't know if you can get in front of it. So you need to not allow that sort of, those informal coaches or your board or your alumni telling you to get in front of something that cannot be gotten in front of. So if you find out that there was someone who had inappropriate contact with a minor, was arrested in another state, and suddenly you realize, oh my goodness, 3 years ago that person had some contact with our organization. How are you going to respond to that? What are you going to do? You know, the first response we get from people is, well, we have to notify all of our parents. We have to, well, you don't know all of the facts yet, so you can't do any of those things. What you need is critical decision support. You need, and at any time you can call Firestorm. We're going to talk to you for an hour, and we're not going to charge you for that hour. so that we can help you understand what your next steps need to be. We had a situation with a school where we had a school that had for many years used a physician to come and administer shots and some of those other types of things for the school. That person was suspected of inappropriate conduct. And that was a significant event because it affected more than one school. Certainly, this doctor went to many organizations. So those kinds of outlier events must be reviewed and thought through. And by creating a robust network of people and technology, we can help you at least become aware of something when it's breaking. And in the case of something like this that happened, as you may recall, at Millard High School, maybe we can surface this type of a threat. Maybe we can surface a message that someone puts on their Facebook page that is their last message before they return to the school, and in this case, critically wound and kill both the principal and the assistant principal. I'm sorry, the assistant principal was wounded in the assistant principal was killed and the principal wounded in the attack. And he says, everybody that used to know me, I'm sorry, but Omaha changed me and effed me up. And the school I attended is even worse. You're going to hear about the evil blank I did, but that blank school drove me to this. I want you guys to remember me for who I was before this. I know. I greatly affected the lives of the families ruined, but I'm sorry. If we can understand that language, put it into context, put a geofence around your area and pick that up, we hope we never do. Every day I hope I say to you, no results. But one day, if there is a result, we need to be able to intervene as quickly as possible. And we all agree that's the right thing to do. Sadly, there was an incident of domestic violence visiting a school property recently. And again, when that first came down, we saw the news, multiple people down in a shooting at an elementary school in San Bernardino, all that has already been through such a crisis. And that is what we see when we first see messaging, right? We don't know what it is. We don't know the details. And then details start to emerge, either via a press conference from officials or in some other way. And at that point, we can start to look and see where the gaps were. You all need to go to your front desk today and say, I know Mary Jane is married to Billy, and if Billy came into the office today and said, hey, it's my anniversary today, wink, wink. I've got a little present for Mary Jane. I want to surprise her. Would you let him back into the classroom? You probably would. You've been to picnics with this person. You've been to cookouts with this person. You've been to football games with this person. We have to be very cautious in regard to this, and if we have rules and policies and procedures in place, we need to assure that they're followed. The shooter had some very interesting posts on their social media pages. This one is taken a bit out of context. This was in relation to something else, but it shows a way of thinking. It's the folks who think they have nothing to lose with their evil ways that puts innocent people at risk to die. Most fed-up people kill the innocent. And sadly, that's what happened. Jonathan Martinez lost his life. The way we find threats is through awareness of our environment, both the physical environment and the digital environment around us. We put it into context. We need to make sure that we understand what people are talking about, why they're talking about it, and in what context. And then we need to have the appropriate tools and the right people trained on those tools in order to make sure that we're responding appropriately with the right workflows that follow appropriate policy and procedure. At any given time, I can have one of my analysts pull up a report on social media that shows kids talking about guns, knives, and other violence at school at any given time. Some of these threats are jokes, and we need to explain to people we do not joke about this type of thing, and some of these are real. And so we can let you know when we see something, based on our experience, based on the context, it's something you need to follow up on. In this case, when we see someone say, I'm taking my gun to school, yesterday they tried to jump me, we know these are the lyrics to a popular song. That doesn't mean we're going to ignore this. It means we have a student who's repeating the lyrics to a possible song, and it needs to be looked at. At least we have context. And then we can give you some real metrics as well, so that when you're working with your budget and your board, you have some ROI balance on this. We can tell you what the measurement of the conversation is as it relates to your school or your schools. We work with large school administrations that have 30 or 40 properties. We work with large real estate investment trusts that also have schools on their properties, hospitals, daycares, camps. All of these types of organizations need monitoring in order to keep students safer. And while the technology is used to connect, it's the actual people that make that intelligent network important. Why? Because you're the ones who note the behaviors of concern. By implementing a program like BRSA, our Behavioral Risk Threat Assessment Program, we bring all of this data into a central repository so that we parrot bits of data with a resource officer over here and a teacher over here and a student over here. We know what threatening behavior is. It's very clear. It's when I say to you, if you don't do this, I am going to punch you in the nose. Well, that's a threat. That's clear. Behaviors of concern aren't that clear, are they? We may observe on YouTube videos or YouNow. Again, if you don't know what YouNow is, you need to know now what YouNow is, because it's what kids do when they get home. They broadcast live on YouNow. They get gratuities for doing so. Children as young as 8 and 9 are live broadcasting. Well, we can look at some of those things if we know they're out there, those types of communications, the selfie phenomena that just doesn't seem to go away. I think it's a plague more than a phenomena. But we can see if someone's physical, has their hygiene gone down? Is their behavior suddenly taken a change? Are we seeing cutting behaviors in these types of videos and images that they post? Might there be an issue with food or some other substance abuse issue? We can start noticing these things and help when help is needed or when the person doesn't know how to ask for help. At some point in time when things escalate, we have seen in almost every case of significant school violence on a campus in this country a manifesto of some sort, either by video, by blog, on 4chan, on a discussion board, on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram. Somewhere there is some manifesto legacy that we can surface if we know what we're looking for. So let me close this by saying, at any time you can contact us. We'll pop a 90-day trial in for you at a significantly reduced amount, but it doesn't have to be us. You can go to another company or organization. You can do this on your own. You can try it on your own. We'd like to help guide you in becoming aware, both through technology and through your face-to-face communications and network, of what your intelligence network needs to look like. And for every school on this call, it's going to look a little bit different. Your organization has an expectation of management of risk, and your leadership, your senior leadership, and you are challenged to know what is happening at any given time. Even as plugged in as the most plugged in person is in your organization into the youth of today, you're still not plugged in as much as you could be. Utilizing some sort of monitoring service, you can create an intelligence network that complements your face-to-face intelligence network, and we can monitor risks and outreach communications to persons of influence to help us in a crisis or before crisis to identify, assess, and direct response to threats. We can correct misinformation. And while no one can guarantee specific results, and we can't guarantee we're going to catch 100% of mentions. That's impossible. If we only caught one and it made a difference, wouldn't you want to know? Now, most organizations are currently not using any kind of external intelligence to identify potential threats. And we want you to, so that you can move from this stage one area of maturity in your organization where everything is a surprise to what we call a stage 4 culture of strategic maturity. Let us help you do that, because the greatest obstacle to discovery is not ignorance. It is the illusion of knowledge. Let us help you know what you don't know. You can download a brief of today's session in about 48 hours from our website at firestorm.com/brief. And it has been my pleasure today to talk to you about this subject. I want to thank once again the Georgia Independent School Association. And any of you on the call today, please reach out to us if you have any questions or need clarification on any part of today's session. You can reach me at kmasullo@firestorm.com. You can also contact any of us and the lovely and attractive Bill Baker at webinars@firestorm.com, and you can call us toll-free. Visit us at our website, and again, thank you for your time today. Enjoy your spring break if you're on it, and this will end today's call. Have a wonderful day. Goodbye.